Hello and welcome once again. This is Nelson Karanja for Global Oak Media. We have another easy tutorial in After Effects, and today we just want to create some 3D environment and just a beginner friendly tutorial if you are just starting out in After Effects and you want to do 3D text animations. This is quite the tutorial for you. I'm using After Effects 2025, but I believe that any version in the recent past from 2024 will be just fine. This is a new project. Let's just go straight and create a new composition, and I'll call this 3D scene. The resolution, you can change that to whatever you want. If you want 4K, you can change that, but I'll leave this as it is. And I'll leave the frame rate at 25 and the duration at 10 seconds. That is sufficient. You could go ahead and create a background, but for this particular tutorial, I don't think I need that. I just want to go straight into creating 3D text. You can create text by going to Layer and going New and then Text. Or as the shortcut shows here, you can hit Ctrl-Alt-Shift-T, or you can just right click in this area and go New Text. And I will create some text here. I'll call it 3D. You can name it whatever you want. And you can select all of it by hitting Ctrl-A if you want to change the size, for example. And you realize that the moment you start creating, already we get this properties panel, which is just relevant to whatever you are working on. In this case, we are working with text. So this properties panel is relevant to your text, where you can change that. You can change the font type. You can change the font type here. You can change the color, whether you want a stroke and all that. And the anchor point, you can change so many things that you want to change here, including the position. So this panel is quite handy. And let me just increase that so that we can fill up a bit of our space. And if we want to center this, we can come to the align panel. We can align it both horizontally and vertically. Now, to turn this into 3D, we just need to come here and tick this box here. This little cube here shows that your layer is now in 3D. And the moment you do that, you can see we get the ability to rotate even on the Z axis. Basically, you can now rotate it all around. And one of the things that you need to look out for is the renderer that you are in. If you come here, you will see that you have Classic 3D, Advanced 3D Render, and Cinema 4D. Basically, for you to work in a 3D environment in the new releases of After Effects, you've got to be in Advanced 3D. If it's on Classic mode, if you come to your text here, you'll find that this geometry panel is grayed out, meaning you can't change. And it's either telling you to change the renderer, or you can just go ahead and do that. There are two ways of changing that. You can change it here. Click that to change it, and you will have that access to these geometry options. Or if it is in classic mode, when you are creating a composition, if you check your composition settings, if you right click on it and go to composition settings, again you'll find that you have the same renderers here. So you can select from here and it will do just the same. So from wherever you access it, that is quite okay. So you have it and you need that. If you look at it, even though we turned this into 3D, if you turn this sideways, you'll find that it's still pretty much flat. We can change that by giving it some bevel. for example, we could give this one a bevel of 5, and for us to see that, let's change this into anything like concave, so that you can see that outline. You can see the bevel has been added. If you turn it, you find, yes, it has the bevel, and you can rotate it. Yes, it's 3D, but it has no actual depth. What you need is to extrude it. So we can come here and add the extrusion to whatever you feel you want yours to be. So let me leave mine at 30. I think that is sufficient. And you can see our text is now in 3D environment, and it's actually 3D. It's got bevel, it's got depth, and that will really help sell the case for a 3D environment in After Effects without using any plugin. What else can we do here? We could also go to material options and check things like cast shadows. That we will get to this, but at a later tutorial. But I want to change this to give it a more metallic feel, even though here it is indicated as metallic. But if I want to give it a real shiny metallic shine, we can change the specular intensity. For example, I could change this to 75, and let me change the specular shininess to 50, for example. And you see, the moment you do that, your text now has this glossy look to it, and you can see that now it looks different. Let me change the rotation of this text back to what it was, so that we can have the orientation has been changed here. Let me put that back, and I want to go ahead and create like a base for it. If you just create a solid, you realize that a solid does not really have, let's assume we put that as a background. You find that even if you turn this into 3D and you come here, you'll find at the geometry options, you no longer have bevel or extrude. All you can do here is to curve. You can curve it. Let's say if you increase the curve of this, you can see what is happening. You can curve it, and if you want to change this from being huge segments, right now it has 4 segments, you can change this to something else. Let me put 16, and now it becomes a bit smooth. So that all you can do here is curve this, and maybe it's what you want, but it lacks depth. If you turn this around, you'll find, yes, you have a curve, and perhaps that's what you want. You can definitely do something with this if you want, but in my case, that's not what I want. One of the ways you can use this is perhaps just having it as a curved background, like for photography purposes. But in my case, I really don't need that, and I don't want to put a background. I just want a base for my text. So I'll delete that, and I'll come here, and instead of creating a solid layer, I want to come and create a shape layer. If you come up here where there is the rectangle tool, you can select what kind of shape you want. And I want to select the rounded rectangle tool, and I'll just come here and create a rectangle here. And this is not 3D, it's just a shape layer. Let me call this base. You can rename your layers. Let me say this because I said this is a beginner tutorial. So let me not assume that everybody knows how to rename this. You can right click on this and rename. Okay, that's one way to rename it. It will take you there. The other way, if you are on that particular layer and you hit the enter key, the return key rather, not the enter key, the return key, you can still change that. So let me call that base. And right now, if you turn this into a 3D shape, the first thing you notice is where your anchor point is. It's all the way up here. And you know that by, if you start to rotate this, let's hit R on this, if you start to rotate, let's say on the x-axis, you see it's rotating around the anchor point, which is way over here. Okay, if you start to rotate around the y, again, it's all centered around that. The z, again, that. So let's reset these ones, and let's first of all fix the issue of our anchor point. We can come up here to this icon, pan behind anchor point tool, or just hit Y. If you are on that and you hit Y on your keyboard, you now have access to change that. And one of the things I find helpful is to turn on this snapping. You can turn it on and off, and what that allows you to do is that this will snap to the nearest point where it feels it can naturally fit. Let me just pan this camera a little bit. You can see it is still a flat shape. Two things I want to do. I want to turn it 90 degrees on the x-axis to rotate it. So on the x, I hit 90 so that it can lie flat. The reason why I said we don't use a solid layer is it doesn't have geometry options. But if you're using shape layers, they do have the same bevel and extrusion properties that text has. So in this case, let me just put that to convex, and let me change the bevel to also 5 perhaps, but the extrusion, let me put that to 50. You can change the color of this base. I forgot to mention that. If you check up here, you have the options to either have a fill. For example, in this case, it doesn't have a stroke. You can choose to have a stroke. Then now you have a stroke for your base. If you click on the fill, if you disable this, it's going to take the center part of it. Maybe that's what you want. Okay, so here we are. Let's position our text, and I think we already have, as you can see, our text and our base in 3D environment. If you rotate around with the camera, you will see that you have your text. You can move it up if you want slightly. You can nudge it upwards. I'm using the arrow key just to have small increments, and I'll leave it at that. So now here is our text. The other trick that you can use when you are working in this 3D environment, when you want to rotate around your environment, you can either use these controls here to orbit around with the camera. But I also find that if I hold Alt and left click, I can be able to orbit around like that. You can just be able to orbit around. If you hold Alt and the middle mouse key, you can move it up and down. You can like just grab it and hold it around, which means that, as you can see, the icon turns. If you look at the icon on the screen right now, is the same as this one up here. So you can either come here and move it around. Instead of that, you can just hold Alt and then the middle, the scroll wheel, we call it the scroll wheel. You can do that, or if you Alt and right click, you have the same. You can zoom or you can dolly in and out in your environment. Yeah, you can dolly in, and if you check, this is the same icon here. So instead of going up here all the time, to save time, just learn to use the Alt key. And if you ever move your camera around and you want to go back to the origin, instead of trying to align it and trying to move things to where they were, say you want to take it back and you can't really be able to get the exact position, the best way to go back to origin is to reset. So you can come here to the active camera and you can say reset default camera. If you do that, it snaps back to the original orientation. So here we are back here, and we want to introduce some lighting. So first of all, I'm going to add not an environment light, we'll come to that, but let's add some parallel light. You can change the color of your light, and I'll leave everything here as it is. Intensity at 100. The color of your light, you can choose what you want, and once you put that, that is your parallel light, and already it's on your scene. This is the point of interest. You can move the point of interest of your light around. See that? You can change that. And just with that alone, you can actually animate your light. For example, you can come here and you can keyframe. For example, at the starting point, you can put a keyframe on the point of interest. Okay, and you can move it to where you want. Let's say you want it to start from there, and then you can say 2 seconds into your timeline you want that point of interest to move across. What happens now is that you have animated your light, okay, over 2 seconds. Just with that, you already have some animation of your light. Or you can also keyframe the position of your light. Okay, let's say at this point you want to keyframe the position, and let's say that's where the light is. But now in another 2 seconds you want to move this light. You can just grab it and hold it and move it around to wherever you want. And now what you have is an animation based on light alone. Suppose we want to rotate these, but we want them to move together. I can decide to parent the text to the base, so that I can just move, instead of turning text and then coming to move the base, I can just parent the 3D text. You can come here where it's written parent and link, and you can say you parent that to the base. That is one way you can do that. Or you can simply grab this, the pick whip, and just parent it to the base. And now what happens is that if I come to the properties of this base and I move it around, then the text moves around with it. If I rotate it, then it also moves. You can decide to add another light if you want. Let's say, for example, we add an environment light, for example. Let's see. So we can transform this light, and if you rotate that, and one of the things you're going to notice is that the moment you add environment light, you have introduced shadows, because naturally the environment light comes to give your scene some realism. It comes to give it depth. It comes with shadows. So you can rotate all this to have a better feel of what you are looking for. Let's put a solid and call it background, and we'll leave that the color to be white, for example. Let's put that, and let's put it at the bottom, and let's turn this into a 3D environment, and let's rotate that on the x-axis 90 degrees. Okay, and then let's move it down here, S, and scale. Now if you look at that, you will find we have some shadows here. If you rotate let's add, for example, the intensity of this light, and let us rotate this so you can see the effect of your shadows. See, so you can see your shadows are being mapped here. They take a bit of time to process, depending on the power of your computer, and depending on the quality that you have set. You can have, so let me say this one is somewhere there. So when dealing with our shadows, if you come to the advanced render and you go to render options, you can see the shadows, the render quality, and if it is too low, your computer will work faster, but then the quality of your shadows will be compromised. You can also crank this way up, you'll have better quality shadows. And the other way you can do, if you are working with multiple things and you find that the shadows are taking long to render, you can click the draft 3D mode. This allows you to ignore the computation of the shadows as you work. So it turns off the shadows so that you can focus on constructing your 3D scene, and later on when you are done you can turn it back on. That way you move a bit faster. Here we are, we have our 3D environment, and you can animate many features of this. Yeah, so that is pretty much all that we can do for now. So until next time, this is Nelson Karanja for Global Oak Media. Have a wonderful time.